Okay, so let's get started. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the book? Or do you want to start with the movie?
Well, let's go into a little more of a concept here of what we're actually doing. It's
Okay.
not just, it's not just comparing the differences between the book and the movie. It's the fact that there are some movies that actually improve upon the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are going to be some times we talk about movies that are definitely better than the book.
Right.
Jurassic Park, for one. Way better movie than the book. And Jaws. It's not always just going to be like, oh, this is the reason why the movie sucks and what they shouldn't have cut for book's sake.
No. Yeah, it's not going to be us just bitching about movies being bad adaptations. Like, we want to... It's more of an analysis than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the end we'll say, like, this is better, but it's not just a show created to bash book-to-movie adaptations.
Yes. Because adaptations are difficult because you're dealing with an entirely different media, you're dealing with the human attention span, and also budgeting. There are 1,000 factors that go into what makes a good adaptation of a book.
Well, yeah, and when you're writing a book, there's one person and an editor, like...
Publishing people, and that's about it. But...
Right, but, like, when there's a movie, there's over 1,000 people that you have to wrangle, and then producers with input, and directors and writers, and, like, they're completely different processes. We acknowledge that, and we just want to, look at these things in that light.
Yeah, and from our own perspectives, we both went to school to work in the industry. We work with people who do work in the industry, and we've done little bits ourselves. So we have some idea of what actually goes into this. Like, we have experience enough to talk about this and why we think maybe some choices were maybe not the greatest, and they were pandering to certain audiences. And there are just times we're going to be like, don't know why they did that, but it worked. Haha.
Right.
Like, the whole point is, people, I think, forget that movies are entertainment. They don't have to be like a spoken art, or they don't have to be super fluffy. Sometimes a good popcorn movie really does make the world go round.
Which is why I enjoyed Green Lantern.
Yes, he did.
Because it was a good popcorn movie.
There are some good popcorn movies out there.
But Happy Feet is the worst thing I've ever seen.
It is not.
It's the worst movie ever.
Happy Feet is wonderful. Wonderful.
We'll just have to do a special edition of this where we don't talk about books and just complain about Happy Feet. Or I'll complain about Happy Feet.
And I'll tell you why it's awesome.
So anyway, we're talking about It.
Yes.
If you couldn't tell from the background, that I so carefully chose one with a center image that's now covered up because we had to change things.
There we go. Just
Let's do that.
There we go.
So anyway, we're talking about It. And if you have not seen It, it's okay. We're going to start off as spoiler-free as possible, just talking about the book and the movie. And then later on, we'll say, like, okay, we're going to talk about the important plot points and hit those. So.
And we have some varying perspectives on this because I've read the book a few times, and I'm a huge Stephen King fan.
Right.
And Nook just recently read the book for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he just saw the 1990s miniseries
so painful!
For the first time. And I warned him repeatedly before showing it to him what was coming, and I hadn't seen it for years because I grew up a horror fan, so I'm very familiar with it, but I hadn't seen it in a couple years, and now I remember why.
Yeah.
It is so bad.
Yeah. Not great.
That's not neither here nor there right now. But
we'll probably get to that at some point.
We do have like a very old perspective versus a very new perspective, and then both of us seeing the new movie for the first time.
And we just saw it a second time this morning.
Yes, just to really get a good, like, centered idea of what we wanted to say about it. And now we both went in having read the book, and now we could see it without judging it against the book.
Yeah, all the expectations and stuff like that.
We went to go see it as a movie, not an adaptation, and I think that was a good idea.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's just start talking about the 1990s miniseries.
You think that's a good jumping off point?
Well, it's hard to spoil it since it's been out for 27 years.
That's true. I guess we can cover
27
everything.
years.
It's
been out for 27 years.
You think they did that on purpose?
They totally did that on purpose.
That's amazing.
I think they probably pushed it back a year because they were like, oh, it's been 26 years. Let's push it back.
That might be venturing into spoiler territory, so we'll talk more about that later.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
That's really awesome.
Yeah,
like
right?
So the 90s miniseries had Tim Curry
yes.
playing it, and everybody's like, oh my god, Tim Curry's the best! Never replace him ever! We have thoughts. But I will say, as, like, from the frame of book to movie adaptation, the 1990s miniseries was a truer to source material adaptation than the new movie is. It had all of the events.
Most of the events.
Most of the characters. There were some made-up events, like the shower scene wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
Which is the scene that everybody loves, which I think is really funny.
Irony.
But anyway, when we were watching it, I was like, wow, this is like, it's almost beat for the book. You know, the lines are there, the characters are there, everything was there, but it just didn't succeed, like it didn't hold up.
Yeah, this is one of those times where actually sticking to the source material verbatim worked against them. But that's because I think when you work with something like Stephen King, you have to commit fully to it. So that doesn't just mean like the cutesy little moments and copying dialogue. You need to commit to every source of action that he takes.
Well, there's a certain like feel that King has, and I think that's what the new one nailed.
Yeah.
Like it nailed that just the spooky, suspenseful kids coming of age type of story.
Well, it nailed the brutality.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure.
It was the thing about King is that he's so savage in his writing. He's very human. Like, he's kind of a weirdo. He always has been, but Stephen King has always been brutally honest in his writing, in his dialogue with anyone, really. So that's what makes his friendships and his relationships so attractive in his books, is that they are immensely human. Like, even in things like The Shining. Danny and his father have a wonderful relationship in that, but it is shadowed over by something much darker in Danny's gifts versus Jack Torrance's demons. And that's really, that's another one
The
we
Shining
need to cover.
we definitely need to cover.
We need to cover
that book so much.
Right. And the thing about the 90s miniseries I feel never really hit is that never got that humanity in the group. The kids never actually felt like they were friends.
Well, everything was really two-dimensional. And I know that's that's a common thing that people say now, like the characters were so flat and whatever, but like it really was. Like none of the characters were really developed, and that's what I was saying earlier, is like it had all of the pieces from the book. It had, you know, the characters and the lines and the beats and the scenes and the clown and oh boy, you know.
Yeah.
But it didn't tie it all together. It didn't flesh it out any.
It was a melodrama.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It was a soap opera. It was really overacted.
But maybe like it was a victim of being straight to TV.
Well, yeah, I think that's where it really comes down to, is that Stephen King doesn't translate to TV, at least not back then it didn't. Because if you've ever read a Stephen King novel, like 30 pages in...
Like, censorship rules have changed so much since 1990.
You can say shit and you can say bitch, and that is like the first 30 pages.
Still can't say God, though. Can't say God and goddamn. Can't say God.
But I think if someone tried to turn it into a mini-series now, you could easily do it through Showtime or Netflix and do whatever the hell you want.
HBO would jump all over that. And honestly, I wish that the new adaptation was a series.
Well, I think that's why Castle Rock will do so well.
Oh, that's right. That's like the new Stephen King show, right?
Based in Maine, where all of these universes kind of collide.
Is that the new Stephen King book?
Castle Rock?
I don't know. What's his newest book?
Oh, his newest book is oh, bummer.
We're reading not Stephen King. What is the newest book? I don't know right now.
I can't remember the name of it. It's not The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. It's the one after that.
I haven't read it.
I've read The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. I haven't. Oh, Sleeping Beauties? I think it's Sleeping Beauties, but I can't be sure. And I know his son just put out another one right now, too.
Right. Well, his son's kind of killing it, too, right now.
Oh, yeah. Joe Hill is amazing. It is fantastic.
So, anything else you want to say about the 90s? Let's talk about Tim Curry specifically.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest part that people latch onto, and
for
it
nostalgia.
Is, like, the weakest part for us, right? So, like, when I was watching Tim Curry as It, I had already seen the new one, I had read the book already, And again, like, he had the lines, but it's almost like they just pushed him out on set and said, be a clown. But the thing is that it isn't a clown. It's in the
not.
form of a clown for most of it,
Right.
you know. Good choice. It's a good book. And he played this like really hammy clown character, and it was a really weak performance. And for most of it, he was just like, I gotta be weird and chummy, and they added a lot of like weird little clown gags that made him more of a clown.
Yeah.
And my friends that quote this movie and love the 90s hit will quote the lines that weren't in the book, and I'm like, yeah, that's the line that breaks it for me. Like, when he's like, is your refrigerator running? Well, you better go and catch it. It's like, that's not it. It doesn't tell jokes.
Yeah.
And but there was a moment toward the end where I finally looked at you and was like, well, that was actually pretty good. And it was when like his face was just floating in the vines, and he explains like his whole existence.
Yeah.
Like, and Tim Curry actually got to act for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, a lot of it was direction. It was a poorly directed miniseries. And Tim Curry is great, but...
He's a great actor.
The thing is, people keep saying that Pennywise was supposed to be charming to kids to bring them in. When in the book, it's been repeatedly stated that he makes babies cry. Like,
right,
kids don't take balloons from him when he appears as a normal clown at parades.
Yeah, they just cry.
They
when
shy
he's
away
near.
from him.
Yeah.
Like, they just automatically know not to touch him.
Because kids, they kind of sense or see him for what he truly is,
Yes.
while the adults are brainwashed into just being like, oh, he's a clown.
Right. And it's a good... Hi, Juicy.
Hey, Juicy. And hey, Ferret. Sorry, I waved at you, but she was in the middle of something.
Yeah, sorry.
What's up?
I was on a rant. But the thing is, with Tim Curry, he always does just such a marvelous job. But I think this time, it was a miscast because he was too much Tim Curry. He was too hammy. He was too cartoony. Like, I loved him as Darkness in Legend. He's an incredible actor, but I just don't think he was the right choice for this. And I think it was poor direction. They didn't really... If you're going to cast Tim Curry, let Tim Curry do his thing. Don't just let him phone it in because you want to meet these certain basic ideas of what you think a scary clown is.
Yeah, it felt very like Paint by Numbers, the 90s one.
And he played it as a clown. He played it as a clown, whereas this new guy, Bill... Skarsgård, he plays it as something playing a clown.
As evil incarnate, like fear incarnate. So you just want to move on to the new movie now and start.
Well, Game Dragoon thinks that he missed something.
You feel like, let me know what you think you missed, Game Dragon. Is it something that we missed, or you dropped off for a few minutes and all of a sudden we're somewhere else?
We can back up.
Yeah, we can back up. We've talked about this already, so we're probably speaking shorthand through conversations we've already had. So if we're missing points and you guys have questions or comments, definitely let us know. We want to answer those questions that you've got for us. You'll float too. I guess that gets into spoiler territory. We'll talk about that in like the back half, because I want to ask you about Float and how they did it in the new one. So, new movie. Initial thoughts overall.
I thought it was fantastic.
So good.
It's such a good movie, and not even as an adaptation. It's just a good movie.
Right. Yeah. But as a book to movie adaptation,
very well done. They made smart choices.
It was a very smart adaptation because they realized that they were switching mediums.
Yes.
But if you look at it as like where all the beats are and even the time and stuff like that, it's like, this is not the book, but it feels like the book.
Yeah, and I think that's...
And Pennywise is so much more accurate.
Yes, Pennywise is perfect in this, that's the only thing I cared about, really, is as long as they got Pennywise right this time, because He just was such a cartoon in the 90s, and I really wanted to see this terrifying monster that I read it. And the thing about adaptations is you got to make sure that the actual spirit of the book comes through. Like, that's why I think a lot of adaptations fail. They don't capture the spirit of the book, why people love it the way they did. I think that's why a lot of people liked Fight Club, is because a lot of the spirit of it came through, even though it was,
I need to read that one. I haven't read it
was a
yet.
very Hollywood dollied up adaptation, but
Sure.
for me, the spirit of it was there.
Huh.
So I thought the movie was actually pretty good. So with this new It movie, it had the spirit of the kids. I actually felt like they cared about one another. I felt the camaraderie was really there. Bill really cared about Georgie.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and
he
that was a big
really
thing in the
cared.
book. That was a
Yeah.
big thing in the book. He loved Georgie, and the '90s
And
one
his
really
guilt over it.
really failed to show that.
Yes.
And then this new one, like, they hammered it home. That was his whole character arc, was like coming to terms with Georgie.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much, but yeah.
No, and how he feels as an older brother, his responsibilities to Georgie, this much younger, much more sweet character.
Yeah.
Very, very, very sweet. And I feel the 1990s miniseries really missed that mark.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, like, they didn't really flesh out the characters, but the new one, the kids are fantastic.
They are.
Bill, he doesn't have like a real standout role, but he's such a lovable protagonist. And,
He's a very strong support.
I mean, he carries the whole thing, and he does a great job acting. Richie with Finn Wolfhard, he's probably the only actor name I'm gonna know just because he's from Stranger Things.
Yes.
But he kills it. He's hilarious. Eddie, I think they played him perfectly. I don't know. What do you think about the kids? Like, who's your favorite kid? What moments stuck out to you?
Richie is my favorite.
Oh, Beverly. I have to say, Beverly.
Beverly's
was just,
perfect.
Oh my god.
Beverly's perfect. Richie's my favorite because he is obnoxious. In the book, he is so obnoxious yet
really
lovable,
is.
and I was worried they were going to make him like too much of a comic relief in this, because that's what he is all the time. I'm sad we didn't get to hear more of his ridiculous voices.
Yeah.
We got 2 of them, which was great.
There were 3 or 4, I think, because he did the staph infection.
Yeah.
He did, like, get in there, doctor, suck it out, you know,
Yeah.
that type of thing. There were, I don't know. But yeah, there were only a handful of instances.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, him doing
Game Dragon's
it all the
leaving.
time.
I think we're scaring people off.
All right,
with our
see you,
book
Game
talk.
Dragon.
But I think the one that suffered, though, the one character that they had to really water down, but I think that's because he's getting a boost in Chapter 2.
I hope so.
Mike. Really.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Stan.
Nope.
My bad.
Nope.
All right.
Stan has always been a weak side character for me.
Right.
I'm sad that they watered him down more.
They took the one thing away from him
Yeah.
that he did in the book. So in the book, Stan's character, he never really did a whole lot. You could tell that he was actually afraid of what was going on.
Yeah.
He was, like, more grounded than the rest of them. The rest of these kids are fucking nuts for going into a sewer and chasing down some space clown.
Yeah.
But Stan, it was like, I don't know about this the whole time. And that's
he
how he
acted
was
like a
in the
real
movie.
kid.
Yeah, like a real person. And then at the end of his role in the book was that, like, he cut everybody's hands to have them make the promise of coming back when it returns, if it returns.
Yeah.
And they didn't have him do that in this.
Yeah.
And that was, like, really the only role he had, and they took that away from him.
Well, they reassigned a lot of stuff too, because Mike is more of the historian
right,
of
yeah.
the area. His family's been around a lot. He knows more about dairy history than anyone, really. And they kind of gave that to Ben,
Who was, like, the new kid.
who's the new kid who is curious about dairy history.
But it fit really well. And that's
It
one of those,
works.
like, smart adaptation things where he's the new kid, he doesn't have any friends, so he's going to spend his time in the library
Yeah.
learning about the town he's in.
Yeah, I just felt like they kind of took some time away from Mike. I would have liked to have seen a stronger Mike.
Yeah, and I, like you said, I hope that they give him that boost in Chapter 2 and that he does, like, in the book, he becomes the librarian of Derry, and he learns all this history, he starts chronicling all of the times that it has returned, he realizes what the cycle is,
He's
and then
the watcher.
he stays behind, and then he's the one who calls everybody back when it starts to come back.
Yep. And I've already read some snippets of what is going to be happening with Mike in part 2.
We'll have to talk about that later, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later because it's a big change, and a lot of people are not happy about it. But based on the choices they made with this one, the changes they made to some of the stories, the personal characterizations, I think it might work. It's just going to rub people the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be the hardcore traditionalists like me who grew up reading the book. And they're going to have to learn to let that shit go. And remember, it's an adaptation. You can't keep everything and put it into a movie and have it be good. See version 1990 for reference. Because they were amazingly faithful to source material.
They're so faithful.
But poor choices with timing. It was boring. It dragged. They cut the wrong stuff.
I remember, I didn't want to pause the 90s. I know we've already beat this dead horse that is the 90s version of it. But just one thing, when we were watching it, I was starving. But I knew that it was 3 hours long, and I was like, I don't want to prolong this any longer. I just want to watch it. And I finally hit a point where I was like, screw it, I'm going to go eat. And we paused it. It was only 45 minutes in, and I was like, oh my God, why? It just felt like an eternity to watch that movie.
And I understand there's a very large nostalgia point for this.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of people love it because they have a connection to it, and it scared me. It made me terrified of clowns.
Well, a lot of people watched it as a kid, and
yeah.
I think if I had watched it as a kid, I'd probably be afraid of clowns. It'd probably have made a bigger impression on me, and I would have been afraid of Pennywise. And when I grew up, I would have had that oh yeah, I remember Tim Curry as it. He was fantastic, and then not watch it and just live with that viewpoint, you know?
See, I'm a soulless monster who was raised on horror films because my mother didn't keep a very good eye on me. And even as a child, I remember falling asleep to the miniseries. I thought it was boring as balls.
Oh, really?
I'm so bored. I was like, I don't care. I don't care. And then I got into middle school and I read the book, and I was just like, oh.
Hello.
I like this better. And I was like, God, that miniseries was awful. And everyone's like, aren't you terrified of clowns? I'm like, no, they're dumb.
So, with the new one, what other things really hit? What things really connected? Or looking at it from book to movie, what things were faithful? Let's talk about that.
Can I just say the overall design was incredibly faithful?
Yeah, even though they moved it up 30 years to the 80s,
it worked.
Still, they nailed it.
Because you got to think about this. Stephen King wrote this a long time ago, and just it's written for a new audience, and no one our age is going to connect with something in the 50s.
No.
The 80s was a very smart choice. We're kind of hitting that nostalgia for the 80s right now, which will probably fuel Ready Player One.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The nostalgia factor is huge now.
Well, I think Stranger Things was the thing that really kicked off the
kick.
80s.
Yeah, it's a big kick. They really tapped into that at the right time to kind of catapult them ahead of everyone else.
Right.
But I think it was the general just design of the film was like they just took a peek inside my head and brought everything out.
That's crazy.
The kids were, the costuming was right, the town looked and felt like Derry. It was that perfect, quaint little Maine town. Pennywise.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Was perfect.
So,
Well,
you're talking about
everything.
design, right?
Yes.
So this was the thing that a lot of people had problems with,
Yes.
was the French clown.
The 1920s French clown costuming that they pulled a lot of inspiration from, because the town of Derry was founded in like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
It's just so smart.
It
It's just so smart.
It is, because that's when he first starts showing himself to people. He'd been there much longer, but that's when Derry itself had actually been founded, and he started feeding off of these people. And
right.
And to show like this really early period dress with the 1950s, 60s, and then a little bit of the 70s clown makeup was incredibly intelligent, because it just shows like the rings of a tree. It just shows his age.
Yeah.
Or its age, I should say. That's a whole other debate. But
well, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
again.
we'll get to that later.
That's another thing.
But it was incredibly brilliant. I don't think people gave them enough credit for how good he really looked. And people were like, "Oh, his makeup looks tacky." I was like, "Yes." Have you seen pictures of old-time clowns?
Well, also, have you seen the 90s It?
Oh my god,
like,
it's so bad.
They went to a Halloween store and just, like, which one fits Tim?
Yeah,
all right, we're taking
on a
this
budget
one
here.
back.
With the frills, the dancing bells.
I mean, when I first saw the design for It, I was like, this is kind of goofy. I don't know.
I loved it.
But then when I saw the movie, I was like, I'm in. You got me.
And it was really well how they designed it, because they emphasize his height by cutting the length of the pants on his costume.
Right.
They keep it below his knees, up high on his shins, to the point where it makes him look stretched in a cartoony and very, very alarming sense. It looks ill-proportioned, which makes him look even more menacing. And then you put him, who is 6.5 feet tall,
Naturally.
next to kids.
Just Bill Skarsgård is 6.5 feet tall.
The whole family's freaking tall.
And then they did the makeup to emphasize that.
Yeah, and they put that huge cap on him, and he's just a monster. He's literally a monster.
And his head looks like a balloon. It's shaped like a balloon.
Yep.
Just.
And I think it was great that they carried over the red bozo hair from Tim Curry. I really liked that. It was just incredibly smart design that I think people were too quick to shut down because it wasn't Tim Curry.
It was different.
It was different, and people didn't like it, and I'm like, you're not appreciating some of the really good stuff that's going into this, folks. I'm just saying.
So what do you think about all of... I think we're going to have to move into spoiler stuff. I think that's just where we're headed.
Yeah, we're heading that direction.
So, spoilers for someone who hasn't seen the movie or read the book. We're going to be talking about the endings of both and kind of how they tie together and choices that they made to
and how this might affect chapter 2.
And like how chapter 2 might be affected. So,
if you don't want to know about what happened in this movie or how it might affect the next one, I would suggest you stop now.
So I want to start off with the float.
Floating.
You'll float too.
Yes.
So
floating.
in the book, You'll Float too was very ambiguous, but when I was reading it, it just kind of seemed like he was talking about the sewers, talking about the water. When you die, you'll float. You'll be down here too. In the movie, well, how did you interpret it in the book?
I took it two ways. The first way is a very physical form, which is floating in dead water in the sewers. The second way I took it was from the thing that isn't Pennywise, and it floating in the deadlights.
Right.
Because that was pretty much... That's pretty much how it truly feeds, is it brings you past yourself into the deadlights, into something else. It knocks you into nothingness. It feeds off of your energy and your body. It nourishes both itself. Like, it's really a compact, horrible fate. You're mind raped, and then you're literally being eaten alive.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty sure he eats everyone alive.
Yeah, and then in the movie, the way they adapted You'll Float too, you had issues with it at first, but at the end of the film, you actually travel to where it lives.
Yes.
And where all the dead children, all the missing people, the things that were taken with them, I guess, have been built into this huge monument up into, I'm assuming, what is supposed to be the standpipe.
Yes.
And around it are the corpses and limbs and remains of the people that have been taken, and they're literally floating in the air around the center pyre monument thing.
Yeah.
I also want to talk to you about the door. Don't let me forget.
Oh,
so,
yes.
You said something really interesting just now that it just like made something click about like floating in the deadlights.
Yes.
So in the book they do the ritual of Chud, and the ritual of Chud is about it's like an old legend, I guess, of like you bite the tongue of a demon and it bites your tongue, and then you tell riddles back and forth until somebody wins, essentially.
Yeah, it's basically a mental battle between two participants.
And so in the movie, or how they act that out in the book, is that Bill goes in and he ends up initiating this chud thing where he's like floating in air and having this mental battle with it to win. And you were mentioning like floating in the deadlights, and I think that's probably why they took it that direction, to have all these corpses floating and stuff, because of what he does to Bev. So he picks up Bev, his face peels open, which was fantastic makeup, like you were saying with the lines, which we can talk about. And then you see the deadlights.
The beginning of the deadlights.
Bev glazes over and starts floating.
Yep.
And so, like, at that moment, even though they've never mentioned chud, like, she's locked in that battle of chud right there.
Yes.
And so she's floating, just like Bill was in the book. And so it feels... Man, it feels so much smarter than I thought it was. Like, I had never thought about that's why all those corpses were fighting, or were floating there, was because of Bill actually floating in the book in that battle of chud.
Yeah. And
that's
there's
really cool.
You'll notice something when he first, before he sends her into the deadlights. Oh, hi.
What's up, Reactive Cat?
Hi, Reactive Cat.
This is a totally new thing where we're reviewing book to movie adaptations, and we're talking about it, and we're in spoiler territory, so
be prepared.
Here we go.
The thing about the floating, when you notice when he first tries to scare Bev, when he's holding her up and she says, "I'm not afraid of you," he smells her.
Right.
And it's because the fear marinates the meat. That's how it describes its feeding process. It scares people to sweeten the meat. So the reason he didn't eat her is because she probably would taste awful at that point. Bravery tastes bad. So that's why he just left her floating, because he wasn't going to eat her at that point. He just left her as bait. So, oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I hate my hair a lot of the time, so I really appreciate that. I'm so close to taking it off.
Well, you've been saving it for the wedding.
Yeah, for the wedding, and then I'm going to chop it off and donate it.
1 more month remains.
Yes, and I can just cut it all off. Because it's too hot here to have long hair. It's just, ugh. But, the floating that they did in the new adaptation was just kind of like a pantry. It's where he's keeping all of his food sources.
Right, that's what I was thinking about it. Like, when you see Mike getting beaten up by all the bullies, and he looks over and it's just like waving the cut off arm, and he's like,
Eddie Kozak.
Yeah, I think like he just grabbed that from his float stash
and
like
just,
went
like,
out
chomping
to,
on it like a candy bar.
watch Mike get beat the hell out of. What's your lady friend's name? This is Snips. This is my fiance. Yeah.
I do all the
Snips.
artwork.
She does all the artwork for the channel, and she's writing a comic, a horror comic, and yeah.
General horror fiend.
And she
it is my thing.
Reads lots of books, and we talk about them, so we decided to stream it.
Yes, because he's new to the book.
Yeah.
He just read the book.
She reads a lot more than I do. So.
And I have reread the book many, many times, so we figured we would talk about the differences and how this new one is, I just think it's a better adaptation.
Oh, it's totally a better adaptation. So.
But yeah, I mean, out of all the choices,
Reactive.
I think, unfortunately, it's one of those things where you're not going to catch all the Easter eggs unless you've read the book.
Oh yeah. I think that's what you started off with the new movie is that the new adaptation is a good movie.
Yes.
And if you've read the book, you're going to get so much more out of it. But if you haven't, you're still going to enjoy the movie.
You're still going to enjoy it.
And that's what's really good about the new movie.
Oh, I'm going to go see it tomorrow.
You're going to go watch it tomorrow?
It's worth every penny.
It's amazing.
It is so good. I don't get scared at movies, but my heart did race a couple times.
It's so suspenseful.
And I had goosebumps the entire time.
It's so great.
Like, I don't think I was scared, but it was a wonderful movie. Like, normal people will get scared, not dead on the inside people like me. Like, I don't cry at movies either. I got glared at by an entire row of people because I didn't cry at Toy Story 3 when they're all grabbing hands. I'm just like, this isn't how it ends. You guys know that, right? So many dirty looks.
You know, story structure, right?
Right?
This is the climax. We're coming down after this.
Like, nobody's dying. You guys know that, right? They're just like, shut up! They love each other. Okay.
This would be good going into it with a fresh mind. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think you'll enjoy it more since you haven't read the book, you're not going to have those expectations for it to be faithful to a book.
Oh yeah,
you're just
absolutely.
going to enjoy a good movie.
And if you go read the book after you see the movie, you're going to be
There
like,
you
oh.
There you
Man, it feels like space again. Thank you for the bits, man. Appreciate it. What do you think of this haircut? Would you get a leopard print mohawk like this guy?
I actually had a mohawk,
I had
bright blue mohawk, for about 2.5 years. So I'm not going to do a mohawk this time because I work in a biopharmaceutical marketing team.
Right.
So I can't have a blue mohawk again.
I had a zebra mohawk one time.
You did.
That's a real thing.
That's a thing again.
I got your link over here. Let me check it out.
Make sure it's safe for the kids.
Exactly.
But I think it's going to be a good horror movie for anyone who hasn't seen it. Or that is a really impressive leopard mohawk.
That's amazing. He's actually got kind of the zebra stripe thing going on.
Damn, that's actually really... That must have taken forever to do. Oh, those little spots. Oh, for you.
Yeah. I've been thinking about doing something wacky like that again.
I'd support it.
Oh, Rex Cat. My mom is a massive Stephen King fan. She has every one of his books for Christmas because she had all of them. I looked up what Stephen King's favorite book was and got that for her. I thought it was interesting seeing what inspired Stephen. That was really interesting.
That's
what
cool.
what was his favorite book? What was the one that you got for her?
It wasn't Dracula, was it? Because I know he really loved Dracula.
So I do want to talk about the makeup. We can kill some time while
Yes.
people are responding. So the makeup, the spoiler territory of it is when he has Bev, she's woken up, and he like lifts her into the air to show her the deadlights, and his face fully peels back.
Yes.
So like before, you've seen his rows of teeth come out and bite and kill people, but this time like his face splits open and shows the lights
The
inside.
deadlights, yeah.
And the cool thing about the makeup is those streaks from the eyes.
Yep.
And they were really, really weird at first. Like, they're kind of creepy. They're sharp and they're red and they like look like tear streaks, you know, kind of like, I mean, clowns have
Yes.
the crosses over the eyes. But those lines are where his face peels open, which is something you pointed out to me. I didn't notice it.
Yes.
I didn't see it, but then like on second viewing, I was like, oh boy, like the
Yeah.
whole time, like when his teeth come open, you see like his mouth stretches a little bit right there, and I was like, oh man, it's so smart.
Well, that's the thing. That's where good creature creation comes in.
Oh yeah.
You have to have function to go along with your feature. And the thing is, isn't the new Pennywise costume and makeup, they have functions. They have reasons for why they're there. They're not just there for shock and awe value. He has the really wide makeup to show a wide mouth. Like, it's really well done. And
It's just lipstick.
it's just lipstick. It's really well done. With his costume, he has a dancing costume. So they have the dancing bells, and it's just it ties into who he is as a creature. It's really smart design.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that they didn't have with the miniseries. They didn't take time to actively design this book to be on film. They just did a paint-by-numbers adaptation. They're like, we'll figure it out later. And it's like, no, you really should take the time. This is what good concept art does. It fleshes things out so you don't have to try to make or break it on camera. So, yeah, this Pennywise was just really brilliantly done. And his eyes, oh my god.
His eyes are so cool.
There's less CGI in this new movie than you people think. Like, he can do weird stuff with his face.
Well, he has a lazy eye that he has to consciously
Yeah.
keep in control.
Yeah.
And they tied. So in the beginning, like when he's in the sewers, you see like his eyes start to drift off at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first saw it, I was like, that's a weird choice. But then we read an interview afterwards, and they didn't CG that in. Like, it was just an idea the director had. He drew it in this little drawing of Pennywise, this idea that he had, showed it to Bill Skarsgård, and he's like, yeah, I can just do that. And so he has one of his eyes just like drift off, and they played it into his character. So like every time he's about to transform, has transformed back into Pennywise,
or just
if
loses his puppeteering,
if he's losing his concentration on what he is, his eyes start to like drift and get wild, and it's all Bill Skarsgård, except for when it goes totally white. I'm sure, like they probably did some of that.
He can get them pretty high up, but for complete white, they had to CGI it. But he has an incredible amount of control with his face. He has a very, very emotional face. So when they first started discussing how they were going to do Pennywise, he and the director sat down. And he's like, "This is all the stuff I can do," and he was like, "Awesome, that we're not going to CG any of that. You just." Cool. We'll see how it looks on camera.
Man, it feels like space again. Thank you for the bits. You can do the leopard spots with celery sticks or Q-tips. You bleach an uppercut, then make brown dye circles, then black dye leopard spots around it.
That's a lot of work.
It is. I dig the zebra because I used to have that. So
yeah.
I remember I read Cujo once, and now I think every dog is gonna eventually turn out like that. Aww.
And here's the thing: Stephen King doesn't actually remember writing Cujo.
Was it
a massive alcoholic and drug addict?
Drug era, yeah.
Yeah, that was his really bad time. And apparently he wrote Cujo completely blitzed out of his mind.
That's nuts.
And it did wonders for him. I mean, he's completely stone cold sober now, but...
Thank God.
Well, after his accident, when he got hit by that van...
Oh.
Yeah, it, like, shattered his hip in 3 different places, broke both of his legs... It, like, shattered one of his legs, and he thought he was going to retire from writing completely, which I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah, because you can't type without your legs.
Well, he was in an immense amount of pain, and he didn't want to... He just couldn't get there anymore into that space.
I understand that.
And then he came back, and now he's writing better than ever, and it's, like, the second golden age of King because of Mr. Mercedes, and Bizarre Bad Dreams, and Full Dark, No Stars, and... He's doing some really twisted stuff. I'm starting to think, I was like, maybe that van wasn't such a bad thing.
Or maybe you should do more drugs and calm down a little bit.
Maybe it kind of kept him a little level. But he is a literary genius, and I love Stephen King. Yeah. The Shining is like in my top 5 books ever. Once
you got me to read The Shining, I was like, I want to read them all. Like, The Shining is so good.
Which makes the film.
I still haven't seen the movie. I've seen like... We
tried,
and I think I fell asleep.
Yeah, you made it through the first 40 minutes and you were done.
What are both of your favorite books? We'll answer this question, and then I want to talk about the weaknesses of the new movie. What are both of your favorite books by him? Shining, and I mean, so far I haven't read a whole lot of King yet. I've read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which was... I read that in middle school, and it really, like... changed how I looked at storytelling and stuff. So, man, to put that in my top 2 though.
You like Gerald's Game, don't you?
Gerald's Game?
I thought I remember you talking to me about Gerald's Game.
I don't remember Gerald's Game. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, It, and The Shining, I think, are the only ones I've read by King.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to get him to read
Salem's Lot. I'm
Salem's
really limited. Yeah, Salem's Lot seems really interesting, and to pick one like. Oh man, that's so hard. It is really, really good. I think I'd have to choose It out of the ones that I've read so far. But I'm pretty limited. She's the one who reads a lot more than I do. So.
My mom gave up buying me books a long time ago. I'm a speed reader, so there's no point in people buying me books because I finish them very quickly. But at the same time, I reread books a lot. Like, I pick my favorite ones, and I have certain seasons for certain books. And now we're coming into my Stephen King season, and then for after there, it's going to be like Harry Potter
for Christmas.
And then like late Christmas, early like into January, I will be probably rereading Lord of the Rings again.
So she bought her mom McTeague, A Story of San Francisco.
Oh.
I've never heard of that. I'm going to copy that over here so we can check it out later.
Please do.
There you go. Fun.
More books. But I have to say, my 2 favorites are...
Thank you for the bit, Lucky Fava Bean.
I have to say my 2 favorites are Salem's Lot and The Shining. I really love The Shining, but Salem's Lot is one of my absolute favorites. I don't only read fiction.
Have you read Infinite Jest? Have you read Infinite Jest?
I haven't read Infinite Jest. I do read a lot of nonfiction too, but I can't recall off the top of my head because they're not in my reading circle right now. I tend to rotate through like 3 books at a time. And I think the most recent one was I was reading about the Grand Empress Catherine the Great of Russia, and then before that I was reading about the famine in Ireland.
Yeah, you've said that
And the
like,
rise of the
if
IRA.
you had to choose a different occupation, it'd be a history teacher.
Yeah, I would love to teach history. I really like history, but I do love Harry Potter more than
she
some of my
got
age
me into
should.
Harry Potter. It was not something that I got into before, and then we met and she got me into it. I haven't read all the books yet. I read the first
3?
I think I read the first 3 one summer, like during college. I just sat down and was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I got through the first 3. And I love Prisoner of Azkaban. That would probably be my favorite so far.
It's
and
one of my
it's the
favorites.
best movie too, I think.
Oh, it's definitely like in the top 3 of all the movies.
And we'll have to talk about that another time.
Yeah, that's like a whole other thing. I will say that my favorite Harry Potters are 3, 5, and 7. And the biggest reason that 5 is even in there is because while it is not the easiest one to read, because Harry's a little bit of a bitch for most of it. I mean, he's a teenage boy, he's having his issues. It is probably the most humanly gratifying, because that's when we see our protagonist is not perfect.
Okay.
He is a mad teenage boy who is kind of getting stiffed on a lot of stuff. Like, a lot of people are up against him. The world is actively fighting against him. And you kind of see him falter.
She really likes Harry Potter.
It's a good book. And it's nice to see characters that are flawed. Like, Harry has been like this golden boy hero for most of the series. And then someone dies. And he's like actually kind of traumatized by it. And then it gets rough. Like, and him and Sirius like trying to bond, and Sirius is having his own issues to deal with, and he's trying to be a godfather to Harry, and I really like those relationships.
So, what were the weaknesses of it? Just to bring it back.
Yes, let's bring it back to it, shall we?
Oh, we did get a bit, though. I'm going to read that. So, thank you again for the bit, Lucky Fava Bean. I mostly read nonfiction. My favorite book was Surely You're Joking by Mr. Feynman.
Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman.
Mr. Feynman, I would recommend
Infinite Jest.
Infinite Jest. Cool. All right, so what were your weaknesses of the new It adaptation?
The swapping around of characters. I don't think you should have to reassign the jobs of certain characters to others because you think it might, you think you're improving upon them. I don't think that Ben and Mike should have been swapped the positions of the group.
Okay.
Like, Mike is the historian. Ben is the tank of the group. He has the bulk, he has the mindset, he's devoted to Bev. He is willing to throw himself into danger. He is a tough kid.
See, you're saying that, but we watched that 1990s adaptation and you were like, he shouldn't be like that. And he was like throwing himself into danger, and he was a bullheaded like football player.
Well, that's because I didn't think I said he didn't look like.
Okay.
He didn't look like Ben.
He didn't look like Ben.
He wasn't a fat kid. The 1990s kid was
He
not
wasn't.
a fat kid.
He was just a stout like football player guy.
He was a stout football player. I was
Yeah.
like, this kid isn't fat. The kid in the new movie is, he's paunchy.
Yeah.
He actually is fat.
He looks like Ben did in my head.
And I like those few moments where you see awkward, adorable Ben,
Oh my God,
who can't
so
talk
cute.
to Beverly, and it's
It
beautiful.
totally reminds me of me when I was a kid, because
so
I
cute.
was a short fat kid when I was in grade school, and like I had trouble talking to girls. So me and Ben are like right here.
Yeah. Anything
see,
in the book.
I'm kind of on the other side of it though,
Yeah.
because I really like the choices they made with the characters. I'm sad that Mike got flattened out.
Yes.
First of all, like I feel like we need representation of all races and genders and all that stuff in films, and it's unfortunate that the black kid took the hit. Like that really fucking sucks. But, and I hate to say but after that, but
you felt they made the smart choice.
they made a smart choice, because Ben was the new kid in town. I kind of talked about this earlier, but he's the new kid. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't know anybody.
Yeah.
So he spends his time in the library, which is something he did in the books.
Yes, he did.
Ben spent so much time in the library that he becomes an architect later on
Yes.
in life, and he bases like one of his most famous pieces of architecture off of like a hallway that
Yes.
connected two buildings in the library. So it makes like he already spent a whole lot of time in the library, and then you've got Mike, who's also spending a lot of time in the library.
Well, he
And
spends
so
a lot
I
of time
think
with his parents, who his parents were all about the history of Derry.
Well, yeah, but he becomes the librarian,
Yes.
and so I feel like it was more of a like in the book there was kind of this gray area, and so they made like the library is Ben's home, and Mike is now this. Like they kind of like really made black and white decisions. Ugh, shouldn't have put it that way. They really made red and blue decisions with with those characters, and I was actually okay with it.
I might get over it because of what's going to happen supposedly in chapter 2.
So talk about what you've heard about.
Okay,
chapter
so
2.
supposedly chapter 2, the issue people are having is that Mike becomes a drug addict in part 2.
Oh.
Here's why, though. It's not because they're trying to get the black dude hooked on drugs. They're doing it because he finds out about the ritual of Chud. And so he starts doing peyote and all these psychedelic drugs to figure out why.
That's how they're going to work in the smoking?
That's how they're going to work in the smokehouse.
Yes.
Because they're going to have him trying to figure out how to permanently kill it.
So. To both go off of that and answer one of your questions, Reactive Cat, if there was anything in the book that we liked and wasn't shown in the film, in the book, they find out about this ritual of Chud, which we kind of talked about earlier, telling riddles and this battle for your life and battle for your sanity and stuff. And another one of their rituals was this like smokehouse thing. So
Native American.
It was a Native American ritual, right?
Yeah.
And so they locked themselves into their little fort that they had built in the woods, and it was covered up with dirt and completely sealed off so nobody could see it from the outside. And they started a little fire. And what they were trying to instigate was these visions. So the Native Americans would sit around a fire, and eventually, like, the smoke would, make them pass out. And
they would have
visions, right? And I was so looking forward to, but also kind of worried, and I'll explain why. They have this vision of it arriving.
Like how it came to be in Derry.
And it super spoiler territory here because it's not in the movie at all. In the first one, it's in the book. It came from outer space.
It crashes into
it was a
prehistoric
Derry. So I believe Richie and Mike both have this vision in the smokehouse where they're in like prehistoric Derry, Maine, when it wasn't Derry, Maine, obviously, and this silvery comet crashes out of the sky into the ground. And that's it arriving there, and that's how it started to like thrive on that area. And once the town got built there, it just kind of started taking control of everything. And I was really looking forward to that scene.
To
and
answer
I was
your
like,
question,
to answer your question, because I was like, oh man, they're gonna show it arriving, and that's gonna be the reveal of like it's a space clown. And it's not. I know that's my favorite way to refer to it. It's not a space clown. It's an alien that takes the form of a clown.
It's an elder god.
It is. It's a Lovecraftian elder god all the way.
It's totally an elder god.
And so it lands, and it was going to be mind blowing, right? I was so looking forward to it, and it never happened. I was really bummed. But at the same time, this movie's so smart, because if they had done something like that, I feel like it really would have taken people out of it, and they would have been like, the clown's an alien. They would have called it a space clown, like I am, jokingly, but they would have been like, well, that's a really dumb explanation. And instead, they like slowly revealed that this thing could change its shape, and it has tentacles at one point that's very Lovecraftian.
It has the spider legs at one point.
It has spider legs, which was a cool little throwback to the book. And these things just magically floating. His blood, when he gets cut, floats upward. Like everything.
The blood in Neibolt House floats upward too.
In the
Neibolt House, the movie, when it says the doors say totally not scary, scary, super scary.
When they're dripping,
the blood drips up.
Yeah.
All the blood goes up.
There's all these little hints to like it's not of this world and it's something outside the world. And it wasn't like so in your face, blatant, getting smacked in the face with it. And I was just like, you know what? I missed it, but good job. And so to hear that they're making him a drug addict, that sucks for the racial connections and stuff like that. But I'm so excited.
I think if they're careful about it, they're not going to turn him into a token black guy.
He's just going to be doing it for a purpose. He's
yeah,
not
but it
actually
takes an
addicted.
actual toll on him, because if he does do these psychedelic drugs to see it, like what it really is, it's going to hurt him emotionally and psychologically on so many different levels that he's probably going to become dependent on these drugs just to keep his sanity. Like, he is going to be a broken shell of a lighthouse keeper when everyone has to come back.
Right.
And they're just going to see this wasted away, sad Mike. And Mike's going to be like, okay, I know what we have to do, but, like, at what cost? Like,
For sure.
It's 27 years of sorrow and emotional heartbreak for this character.
Yeah.
And then to have everyone come back.
I wanna read Reactive Cat's paragraph here. I think people see things in different ways, rather than people saying he died because he was black, when surely it was his character development that led him to die. Yeah. Like you said, he was new. I didn't think race, in my opinion, changes anything based on who died or not, if that makes sense. For sure. I agree, but it's also very hard for two white people in America to sit here in front of a camera and a microphone and tell you how black people should be represented. You know, like, that's why I try to cover all my bases, because I do want to see equality and representation in films for everyone. And so I agree. If something's going to happen, it should be based on the arc of the character, the writing, and what tells the best story. And it shouldn't be based off of race or gender. I agree, but if I just come out and say, like, they made a smart choice by making the black kid flat, that means something completely different if I don't say what I said before, right?
It was good for the story.
It was good for the story, but I just feel personally like I have to cover my bases.
And I feel that characters based in novels and comic books do not need to be defined by what they were how they were represented in those mediums. I feel like a character who was originally white in one comic book, you can have a black actor. Like, right. I think it really depends on the actor.
Like the Dark Tower.
Yes, because I feel there are so many white protagonists, it's not going to kill us to open up a little bit and include people of color. I think it would actually enrich things a lot. Sure.
It would make things more interesting.
It would be nice to see a different group of people in front of the camera for once, because all I see are people who look like me, and that can't be encouraging for people who don't look like me. Like, it matters to those people to see representation of themselves up on the screen.
Like in James Bond, I believe there should be a black James Bond. Idris Elba for James Bond. Let's make it happen.
Oh my god. And I know he's getting so tired of people saying that. Like, he has actively said, stop asking me that.
He's like the sexiest man.
So perfect.
He's so
for
suave.
It.
He's
so
got
perfect.
the cadence and how he speaks, and he's an action star anyways, so it's just like, come on.
And like in this new Hellboy thing that happened, the guy who played Francis from Deadpool, he accepted a role for Hellboy that is Asian.
Right.
And he didn't know that until afterwards. It was made clear. He was like, oh, never mind, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, and he totally backed out of it.
He's like, I don't look Asian.
Dude, props to that guy.
And he backed off. He left the project, which is a huge gamble.
Yeah. Because
Hollywood is still pretty behind on things like that, and that could get you blacklisted from any future projects. So it was ballsy for him for that. But the second thing is, they caved under pressure, because people said, don't do this anymore. Every time you guys have whitewashed a movie, it has tanked.
Right.
Like, people are tired of that. They actually went and they cast someone of Asian ethnicity. And I think it doesn't kill people to actually reach out and try to fill out these characters. It really doesn't hurt.
For sure.
Not everybody has to look like Tom Cruise.
So bringing it back
to
it. We talked about the characters getting swapped around. So, but another weakness in the film that I thought was, you said that it came from a director switch.
Yes.
But I don't know the whole back end of that, so you might have to fill me in. In the movie, at one point, so Pennywise, he kills so many people.
Oh, yeah.
Kids go missing, people are dead, people are dying, there's people trying to escape from him, you see it happen, you don't see it happen, it's on screen, it's off screen. He's a murderer. He kills things.
Yes.
If he gets his hands on you, he's going to sink his teeth into you.
Yes.
And there's a story reason why this happened, but it feels weak. And anyway, so at one point in the film, Beverly gets...
I would have said just someone gets kidnapped.
Sorry. Well, spoiler territory. It's on screen right there. Boom, boom, in red and black. Beverly gets grabbed by it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, shit, they just killed off Beverly. And then, like, a scene later, she's
still alive.
Even though
you get that feeling when he takes her.
Well, I mean, they don't show her die. If I've come to a point in my life where I'm watching anything, if they don't die on screen, they're not dead. So
that's fair.
Beverly is grabbed, cut to the next scene, you're like, oh no! And then we see Beverly wake up and she's alive. And I immediately was like, oh, that was weak. That was a real weak choice because he's killed everything he's got his hands on up to this point. And now she's in a damsel in distress situation, which I hate. And it weakened Pennywise's character for not killing her. But after the kids, it worked for the plot, which it was like, it still felt weird though, because the kids show up. I need to get some sleep. Unfortunately, it's 3 a.m., but thanks for speaking to me. It was nice to meet your future wife. Hope to see you soon. See you,
nice
Reactive Cat. Thank you for hanging out. Hopefully we didn't ruin the movie. Go enjoy it.
It's still going to be a great movie for you.
It's still a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the host, Reactive Cat. Oh, that's awesome. So, anyway, Bev is taken.
Yeah.
She wakes up, and the kids show up to save her because she's now this damsel in distress. And Bill comes to this realization that Pennywise didn't eat her or kill her because she wasn't afraid of him.
Yeah.
And so it was like he was saving her in the pantry, right? Until she felt fear. And it was just kind of real weak of them to have a major character taken by this murderer and then not murder them. It felt really weird. And it worked in the plot. Cool. But I mentioned it to you after we saw the movie, and you were like, oh yeah, there was this director switch, and like they were just trying to get things on track.
There's a director
who dropped out. About that you can talk about?
There was, I think it was like 18 months into development, and the original director who co-wrote it, Carrie, I'm sorry, I don't remember his last name.
That's okay.
He's a huge horror director, but he dropped out due to creative differences. So they had to do a little bit of a patch job and patch up parts of the script that were still in limbo, and then they had to change the course of the filming the scenes, because some of the final scenes of the movie were the first ones to be filmed, like period. Mm-hmm. Like Kneebolt was one of the first sets to be filmed.
Man, Kneebolt's so good.
Yeah, Kneebolt was wonderful. It wasn't even in the miniseries. Mm-mm. They cut out Kneebolt entirely.
Well, maybe kind of because of the mummy scene.
Yeah, a little bit, but not much. And then I think the sewer was the second major group of shots to be filmed. So I think those ones feel a little bit weird because they had to be patched very quickly for them to stay on target.
They had to keep They had to write the end of the script to film it first. Yeah,
essentially. And
what was the? Sorry, go ahead.
No, and when he left, I think it pushed them back actually another 8 months. So it's another reason why it came out when it did.
So basically what she was the catalyst for them going down in the sewers?
Yes, because they had a row before then.
Do you remember the reason they finally decided to go in the sewers in the book?
In the book, they come to a point where they're like, okay, we just need to go ahead and do this. Because it's actively coming for us now. It sees us, it knows us, let's just go take care of this. So they did the chud, and they figured out how to deal with it.
Oh, right.
And so the ritual of chud is actually the catalyst for them to go after it in the book.
Because they know that they can have some power over it.
And now that they know about the turtle, and the turtle has told him how to end it, it knows that they know.
Yeah.
So naturally they're like, we should go for it before it comes for us. And that's why they decide to go. But they're also like armed to the teeth when they go.
So since Chud is missing from the book,
They had to find a new catalyst.
and the smokehouse is missing, they had to find a new catalyst to get him to move. Yeah, because if you see any movie and the heroes are suddenly like, let's just go get the bad guy, you're like, oh, okay, and it feels really weak.
Yeah.
And so there has to be like a turning point, like a single like pin.
Yes.
And that's what Beverly became, was just that damsel in distress to be like, we gotta go save Beverly on top of ending this evil thing that's, you know, so it felt real weak, and it was real unfortunate, again, that like a woman had to be put into this damsel in distress stereotypical spot.
But she was never that weak. Oh,
but
help
she
me.
wasn't a weak character.
She was
for
never
sure.
a weak character. She even says, I'm not afraid of you. Like, she stands her ground. She stands up to her father. Like, she's actually a very strong character, which I was really, really, really happy to see. She's actually kind of stronger than Bev in the book.
Oh yeah, for sure.
She has,
in the book, she's totally she's waifish and
yeah.
and more like I
more
always thought of
submissive.
her as like a clean skirt, very proper type of girl, even though she like smokes and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they just nailed her in the movie.
Well, I think like
So
her
good.
with like any victim of abuse, she has an this built-in sense of survival. She knows how to make herself small when necessary. She knows how to make herself gone when necessary. And this Bev was more anger than survival. She was definitely like way more quick to be angry about being hurt and being in these situations than she was to cower and get out alive.
Yeah.
Which I liked about her. There was more fire to her, which I hope they keep for adult Bev.
I think she's gonna become really weak,
Well,
and then it's gonna kick back in.
I hope so.
Because in the book, I'm this is the scene I want to see.
Yeah.
In chapter 2, it's when Mike stays behind in Derry, and he makes all the calls to the kids saying like, it has returned, you need to come back, we need to stop it. And when he calls Bev, she's in a terrible relationship.
An abusive husband.
She's with an abusive husband. She's basically married her father, and he beats the crap out of her with a belt and all this stuff. And the scene that I want to see is when she receives that phone call and she smokes. He's pissed off that she's smoking when he's told her not to smoke around him. So he grabs the belt and she kicks his ass and like has him crawling on the ground, barely able to walk. I don't remember exactly what happens.
She smashes a perfume bottle against his head.
Yeah, so he's just like dazed and bleeding all over the place, and she leaves the house because she knows she has something to do.
Yeah.
Like, she has this old promise that she has to fulfill, and I cannot wait because I know, like, I hope that what happens is that she has become this weak Bev, and you're like, kind of like, what happened to Bev? And then finally it snaps, and she's like, oh, fuck no, you're just like my
Old
dad.
Bev comes back.
You know what I hope happens? I hope the same scene plays out where she smashes him in the head with a toilet. Like, the lid to a toilet. And like I said, like, when Eddie grows up, he's supposed to marry someone that reminds him of his mom.
Yes.
And I hope that they just use the same actress.
Oh, God.
I really do. I hope they... and he's finally like, holy shit, you're just like my mother. And he just leaves, you know?
That was something they didn't do in the miniseries in the 90s, is that they just had him still living with his mother.
Right.
It was weird because...
It was really strange.
It was weird because in the book, he's married someone who... originally they had a business together, and she used to be like really fit and went out a lot and was actually very healthy. But then apparently she's become a shut-in, and she is quite large, and she is scared of going outside. And when Eddie says, I have to leave, I'll be back in a few days, she freaks out. Just has a complete panic attack.
And in the book, everyone leaves. All the kids leave Derry.
Yes.
And if he's living with his mom, the adults of Derry don't leave.
Yeah.
They either die there as humans and normally and are buried, or it feeds on them in very rare cases. And so for his mom to have left the town with him, it was just like, that kind of breaks the book a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Unlike Ben's mom, she packs up Ben and leaves and goes back to Nebraska.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, in the terms of the losers, they all get to leave with their families. Like, everyone uproots and leaves, except for Mike.
Right.
But I think that was, like, their reward for doing what they did. They got to forget and leave.
And Pennywise kind of alludes to that in the film, where he's like, you're all going to leave, you're going to lead these successful lives until you're drawn back to the weeds.
Yes.
Which I thought was really cool. So that he basically just describes the entire second movie.
Yeah. And they all become rich.
Yeah, they're all super successful.
Super successful and
they
rich.
Throw it all the way to come back and die.
Yeah.
Well,
and maybe
some of them.
die.
Yeah, maybe die. We'll see who dies in the film.
I mean, if they're changing stuff, it could go any which way.
So what are your predictions for Chapter 2?
Okay, so Chapter 2, it's already weird how they're changing things with Mike, but I have faith because this one, I think...
It's going to be good.
I think they were really basing what's going to happen with 2 because they haven't written Part 2 yet. They're finishing it now.
Oh, wow.
Because they were basing it on the success of this. They were
that makes sense, yeah.
Horror is not the big draw that it used to be, like in the 80s. And so we haven't had like a huge blow up of decent horror films in a really long time, like budget horror films. It's been superhero movies, it's been Disney movies, it's been princesses and pirates. It hasn't been scary. So now that we're seeing a rated R, going for your gun, a child is mauled in the first 5 minutes of a film, kind of horror film, like it traumatizes parents. Like parents have complained about this movie.
Just
which is
watch
ridiculous.
your kid.
I know, but still,
the whole movie and book should be the handbook to how to raise your children, and not to make people completely overprotective, but don't rape your child. Don't overly protect your child like Eddie's mom does. Don't forget your child exists like Bill's parents do. You know, it's just like, take these tips and then be a good person.
But anyway.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, oh crap. So basically they were just waiting to see how this would do. And the fact that a horror film has broken several records. It's the first horror film to have this big of a release date ever.
It beat out Deadpool, right?
It beat out Deadpool.
I know Deadpool's not a horror film, but I'm saying
no, but it's a big.
Deadpool had the biggest.
It had a big opening.
Yeah.
This is the first horror film to ever bring in this kind of box office.
Yeah, it's because it's truly a horror film. It's not like a cheap jump scare film.
Yes.
It's not going to be like Happy Death Day.
And it's not torture porn. It's violence, not for the sake of violence.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't pull the punches is a huge deal. Like, this is the first time Stephen King has been done well, besides his less horrific books like Shawshank or The Green Mile. This is the first time one of his horror books has done well, like really well.
Right.
And so I think, based on that, they're going to be able to stick to the other stuff that we didn't get to see because they didn't have the time and or they didn't know if they could get away with it. Now that they know people are willing to sit through this, I think we might actually see some of the backstory of Derry. I think we might actually see, like, the Bradley Gang. I think we're going to see the Lumberjack Massacre. I'm hoping.
Wow.
I'm really hoping. That's something I wanted to see.
Well, talk about the Lumberjack Massacre.
Okay, the Lumberjack Massacre. I don't remember
fully what it is, and just for people who haven't read it.
Okay, so there's actually, like, miners and lumberjacks, but there is a time in early Derry times where there is a saloon, and at one point or another, one of the guys kind of starts going crazy, and he starts hacking one of the other guys to pieces. And eventually, everyone just goes crazy and starts hacking everybody else to pieces, and it ends with one guy being on his own. And he disappears and, like, just walks off into the woods to die. Because I don't know if he finally remembers what he did, but eventually everyone ends up murdered. Like, it is a horrible thing. And it's just one of those instances of Derry history where people just prefer to forget. And no one really remembers all these awful, awful things. Or the fact that the entire town, unloaded thousands of bullets into 2 cars because they had gang members in them. Pass the balls.
The booze. What's up, World Laughs? How you doing, man? Welcome to the stream.
And I'm really hoping we see some of the more horrific history of Derry that we didn't get to see in part 1.
Yeah.
because there isn't a whole lot that happens with the adults. I think we have room for it.
Oh yeah.
It goes much faster because even though it is the second half of a book, there is a lot of flashbacks.
Yeah, if you just cut the adult sections out of the book,
Yeah, it's much shorter.
It's a fourth of the book.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much less. And the book is told in this this back and forth style where they're meeting at this restaurant and they have a memory, and that's when you get to live with the kids for a bit, and then they come back and they're like, oh, remember when that thing happened? And then you go back and you live with the kids for a bit, and then they wander around Derry as adults and they have memories, and that's when you go live with the kids for a bit. And so, like, yeah, there's a lot of room for them to expand on the stories of how the kids get to where they are as adults, how their adult lives are. And then also, like you're saying, like, have Mike investigate the history of Derry, and have that opening scene of them, like, killing the gay guy on the bridge and, like, tossing him over.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good story, but, it's brutal.
It's
brutal.
so dark. Well, and I wonder if they're going to put it in there because they already had the kissing bridge in the film just as, like, a thing when they were cutting his stomach. And then you mentioned that his hat said "I love Derry" on it.
Yeah, it had
and
it on
then
the
that's
balloon.
what the balloon said when Hochstetter got killed.
Yeah.
So
I'm really hoping that they actually allude to all of those, because it's those history stories that flash back and forth with the book that make Derry that much more real.
yeah, it fleshes out everything for sure.
But yeah, the disappearances, the black spot. Oh God, I hope they put that in there, and I hope Dick Halloran is in it.
Well, I don't know. Are they? If they do the black spot, they're gonna. Oh my God, that would be a big thing. Because I kind of thought that they replaced the black spot with Mike's backstory.
That's true.
Of
They
burning
might
in
have
the
done
house.
that.
I mean, they mentioned the black spot when they're passing around the folder that Ben has. They're like, "What was the black spot? It was burnt down by that racist clan or whatever, or the racist cult." They called it. So I don't know if they'll go into that. But
That's true. They might just X that all together. I do want to see the standpipe. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that happens with the standpipe.
I think they're going to include it because they showed it so much in the first movie.
I know.
And then once you finally get to where it lives, they don't even really make the connection for you. You kind of have to assume that, oh, this is the standpipe. They don't open the door and they're like, oh, we must be inside the standpipe. It's just Ben has it as a model. It's the postcard that he writes the poem on. It's at one point Bill drives past it and stops while he's heading somewhere. So they've, like, established it as this thing that exists, but they never really went into it as in the movie, even though they literally go into it in the movie. But they never explain what it is or why it exists, and it would be really cool to see more of that. Do you think they're gonna do the world falling apart at the end when it finally dies?
I really hope so, because that was the one thing that happened in the 90s one that I was bitterly disappointed that they didn't do.
Yeah.
Because it matters. Like, it is an important thing.
That's a huge budget thing, though.
That is a huge budget thing, and I know that right now, there's no excuse not to do it, because they are being so touchy about what they're using for CGI that they have the damn budget to ruin Derry at the end. They really do. And it's such an integral point. The fact that Derry is it.
Yeah.
That town does not exist without it. And that is a huge point they make towards the end, is that now that it's gone, Derry will die. And that's what starts to happen.
And the ones that are left over leave and forget about it.
And a lot of the older residents mentioned earlier in the book die horrific random deaths during the storm, the final storm in Derry.
Right, yeah.
A lot of people end up either crushed or drowned or heart attacks.
So just to fill you in, if you don't understand what we're talking about, once they kill it, the town literally starts falling in on itself.
Yeah.
There's a flood, there's a huge storm that's happening, there's an earthquake.
Things cave in.
Like, things explode and cave in, and all the while, Bill's riding his bike with his comatose wife, trying to, like, get her to come back, right? And she finally wakes up, and it's kind of just like the sweet cherry on top of the murder fuck fest that has been the book of it.
That was something I actually really, really hated about the 90s miniseries, is that it was so true to form with a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the places and a lot of the actions, but the characters were all wrong. Like, really wrong.
Yeah.
Bev was super wishy-washy. Ben was just kind of Richie was great.
That was the only good character.
He's the only
Richie.
good character from the 90s series is older Richie.
The redeeming character
But
of that whole thing.
Bill and Audra had a horrible relationship, and they were
Yeah.
estranged, which in the book, they are terribly close still.
Yeah.
Like, he loves her.
And then, even though he loves her, he goes and ends up having sex with Bev back in
Yeah,
Derry.
but it's not... I hate to say this, but it really is just, like, two friends boinking. There's really nothing else to it.
Kind of like writing the end of a book that was written a long time ago. Like, finally just, like, closing that chapter a little bit.
Yeah, you can just tell it's, like, a one and done. And they're both like, that happened.
They're like, well...
Let's go do this. It's like that last boink you get before you die. Because they think they're going to die.
It's your last meal.
It's your last screw. Enjoy it. And I think that's the attitude they have. Where they're like, I'm going to spend this last night with someone I love.
because she ends up taking off with Ben anyways.
With Ben.
Yeah.
Yay!
Which is amazing, yeah.
I was so happy at the end of the book when she and Ben got together. I was like, yes! Fat boy gets the girl!
I don't know. What do you,
I just think... I'm really hoping now that they see that well done horror will get people into the theaters.
Yeah.
Because the theater... Movies have been suffering for a while now. People don't go to the movies near as much as they used to, simply because A, it's expensive, and B, people behave horribly at theaters. And no one wants to pay $18 for a ticket to listen to people talk behind them or look at someone's phone screen. It's just etiquette. Theater etiquette sucks these days.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is why we go to early movies all the time. And I think that they really... Theaters needed this bump. They needed good attendance. And now that they've proven that well-done horror movies will get butts in seats, I think they'll get the budget, they'll get the time, they'll get the creativity. They'll get everything they want to make a good Chapter 2.
Well, oh, absolutely. Chapter 2 is going to be incredible, and they're going to get a huge budget, which actually kind of worries me because a lot more people are going to have their hands in it and say in what happens.
Or they'll have it on lockdown and just be like, no, we're doing it just like we did last time.
I mean, that's the hope.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that will happen. But I think it comes down, like, horror has always been, like, the cheaper throwaway films that are filler, right?
Well, there's no Academy Award for horror.
And there absolutely should be.
Yes, there should.
Now. But it all comes down to, like, story and characters. Do you have good characters? Do you have a good story? Cool. Then you can make any kind of movie you want out of that basis. You want to make a horror movie? Awesome. Then give it that feel. Then you can start working on tone. A lot of people tackle their scripts and their ideas of, like, I want to write a horror movie. And it's like, well, why don't you write a story about a bunch of kids that get involved in a Lovecraftian monster fight that owns a town? That's a cool idea. Yeah, well, now make it a horror film.
Yeah.
You know,
Focus on the strengths
You could
first.
take that same group of characters and that idea and make it into an action flick that has no scares at all.
Oh, and that's the problem, is that so many studios are trying to turn old-fashioned monster movies into action flicks.
That's why Mummy failed. Oh, God.
Well, that was one of many reasons why Mummy failed.
Well, I mean, my main reason that Mummy failed.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Because those movies weren't action films. They were horror films. And they were meant to scare and have people scream in movie theaters and throw their popcorn boxes and go home shivering. It wasn't meant to go, oh my god, you see that explosion? It was so intense. Blah. It's like, no. You had a good villain, and you took her and put her in a bad action movie. Bleh. You had this great physical actress who did well with her creature, and you put her in a shit movie. Like, you can't blame...
Talking about Mummy, specifically.
You can't blame that on her. That was bad writing, and that was just... Oh, it was a bad movie. It was such a bad movie. Oh, it was weak.
So, to kind of, like, close the conversation on it, I guess, let's say which was better or a truer adaptation, or what kind of final thing do you want to say about this?
To come back to my main points, the thing about adaptations is that you have to be faithful to the spirit of the book. Books will change when you adapt them into films because they're two different medias. That's just a hard fact. Even lots of Harry Potter, lots of Lord of the Rings had to change to be filmable, budget-wise and, frankly, attention span-wise. Most of Lord of the Rings is poetry and songs. Didn't translate well. And I think in truth of the spirit, I think the new movie is way more faithful. Yes, they made some changes to the story and backgrounds. Yes, they made some very odd shifts in the plot, but I think the spirit of the book endured, and I think it's actually stronger for it.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts are that if you want to see the book on screen, then go watch your 1990s version and
Melodrama.
and enjoy that garbage. But if you want to like feel and be immersed by the book, it's the new one all the way. And I think not gonna lie, when we did the second viewing today, at the end I was like, I'm so worried about part 2, because it's so good that I'm just worried that it's not gonna live up, and it's not gonna get bigger, and it's not gonna get better.
Because now it has that hurdle.
They fucking set the bar.
They did.
And I'm worried about it, but I have to like keep that faith that the people who made this are going to keep the same spirit and the same type of drive to making part 2 that they did at part 1. So I'm hoping that they can really cap it off with part 2.
Yep, and they're filming next month. They're starting to film next month because the kids are growing. So they need to at least get the kids in.
Because there's going to be some flashback
There's
stuff.
going to be quite a bit of flashbacks.
Yeah.
So they're going to have them in to get all of their parts shot, and then I think they might have a small hiatus while they worry about adults.
Yeah.
Because I know they're scrambling right now to
And we'll
cast
see who gets
the adults.
cast about the adults. You think they're going to do nobodies? Or
I
are they
hope
gonna
they
get
do
big
nobodies.
names?
I think big names will be distracting.
I think so
because
too.
now they have the clout. Like, they obviously people will come see part 2 because of how well part 1 did. They don't need the Hollywood name to sell it. So I think if they do put someone who has a following in there, they better be damn careful who they put in there. I don't think it should be a bunch of A-listers. I think you should get some fresh faces.
Totally. I
think this is a perfect opportunity to bring some new people into Hollywood and give the others a little bit of a break.
So Hollywood, if you're looking for an adult Ben, I mean, I'm not 40, so I can't really.
Yeah.
I
Throw
can't
some
really play
makeup
that,
on
I
you
guess.
and you'll be fine.
So you want to wrap this up, or
Yeah, I
do you
think
have anything else?
I think we've said all we need to say.
All right.
I think
If there's any questions that you guys want to throw at us while we're closing up, go for it. And go ahead.
Yeah, just to end it, I think you should definitely give us a chance. I know if you're hung up on the nostalgia of the first I respect that. We might not agree, but as a fan of horror, I grew up on it since my first memory of a horror film is seeing Alien 3 in theaters because my stepfather didn't want to take my brother and I to a babysitter when he had to run the projection at a movie theater. So I was easily 6 years old watching Alien 3 on the balcony while watching my baby brother. So when I tell you this kind of thing is ingrained in me, I can tell you this is a good horror film. It is rich in character, it is great in story, and it genuinely gets your heart racing. Just give it a chance. It's not Tim Curry. Let it go. Let this new guy do his thing, because they are two entirely different monsters. Yeah. These are two different movies.
And for those of you who enjoyed the book and love Stephen King, you're gonna love the hell out of this movie. Like, it's Pippin.
Thanks, Pip. That's the ending bell.
Pippin's got the dancing bells on. So yeah, if you're a big fan of the book, you're gonna love the movie for sure.
It is.
There's
in terms of spirit, it's very faithful.
A lot of stuff left out, a lot of new things that they added, but I think it was such a smart adaptation. So.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for joining us on the first episode of Covered Credits, where we talk about book to movie adaptations. I'm not seeing any questions in chat, so I guess we'll go ahead and close it up for the night. If you want to see more of me, I stream Monday through Friday on this channel right here. If you want to see more of her, you can go find her at, I'll put it in chat, twitch.tv.
I do a lot of the art for Nook and Cranny Gaming, so I usually am streaming my art projects. I'm on there drawing. I'm probably going to be working on a Pennywise project here for a little bit. I'm working on a poster, so I will probably be streaming that for a little while.
Awesome. I'm excited about that.
But we're going to continue doing this simply because we like just talking about these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll post them exactly here.
Well, they'll live here on Twitch, but I'll also post them on the YouTube channel, which you can find in the link below here on the Twitch. And if you have ideas for future cover to credits that you'd like to see, throw them at us in the comments and on Twitter and all that stuff. And we will, I don't know, we'll be back when we are back. We don't really have a schedule planned out, but
I think we're going to
we'll
start a
go on
Stephen
anyone.
King kick here, though.
Oh yeah, Stephen King's kind of it's in me now.
I think we should talk about The Shining.
We might do The Shining next. Yeah, and then Reactive Cat bringing up Bond. I was like, ooh, we could read James Bond.
We could do.
And I love James
we could
Bond.
do that.
So
Yeah.
anyway, have a fantastic night. Thank you for joining us on Cover to Credits. This is Snips. I'm Nook, and we'll see you in another stream. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.